Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Michael Boeglin, and this is my colleague Zerom Tesfay. We're here from Mercy Corps, and we're here to talk about connectivity. I think this is a really good follow-on from Mads and NRC's discussion, which was very technical and focused on solutions. Ours is very much focused on process and how we were able to do something that really made a big change. So about 18 months ago, yes, sir.
Would you mind closing the door? It's hard to hear back here.
Okay, also, do this if I'm not talking loud enough. It sounds to me like I'm screaming. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So about 18 months ago, we, I think like many of you, were struggling with connectivity pretty badly in many of our locations. Even though it was getting better, we really didn't have a lot of visibility, and we knew we had a problem. So the message around the agency was really that the solution wasn't really there for us. We just had to keep making do until the marketplace came and solved our problem, and that it was okay in the meantime to just kind of suffer through having bad bandwidth. And we started to ask ourselves, like, is that really true? Like, why can't we just fix this? And we decided it was time to really challenge that assumption, and that's what we set out to do. So what we want to talk to you about today really is how we were able to make a really big improvement in a pretty short window of time in our global connectivity, and how we think that the process that we developed could work for you as well. And we're going to give you some takeaways at the end of this that have a lot of the artifacts we used and a lot of our methodology. So if you look at where we started in 2018, we were well on the way to adopting global IT solutions. So we had a global HR system that was going in. We just signed on with Okta to do identity management. We had a global financial system. We were starting to think about a global procurement system. But adoption of all these was being hindered because we didn't have good enough connectivity in the field to deliver these services to the last mile in many of the locations where we were. And it was compounded by a couple of factors. A very decentralized IT organization. We really didn't have a lot of standards. And there was generally just a limited vision of what we could accomplish and what IT's role was to accomplish it. So the message for many years at Mercy Corps had been, let the country programs run themselves, don't mess with them too much. This is their problem to solve. Our role is just to advise and guide them, not to really push for change. And we just knew this doesn't work anymore. We can't deliver global solutions unless we have the ability to ensure we have consistent service everywhere. We did have a few good things going on. So we partnered with Cisco on a grant called the Tech for Impact grant that was being led by our Technology for Development team. But one of the tracks was with IT, was to roll out Cisco Meraki, which was a real game changer for us because for the first time we could have visibility and control over our traffic and understand the extent of the problem and do something about it. We expanded our regional team of IT people by 50%, which actually means we went from 2 people to 3. All of whom are in this room. And we promoted Zerom onto the IT leadership team so that we could have really strong field representation and IT strategy, which for us we felt was really important. We're also seeing much better connectivity, particularly in Africa. There's been huge change over the last few years, and countries like DRC, which used to be huge problems were starting to become really solvable. So we felt like we got a chance to actually do this, and it's possible now. And lastly, the organization was really ready to change. So one of my first months at Mercy Corps, all of the country directors were in our headquarters, and I got to speak to all of them. And they very consistently said, we don't want to be responsible for this anymore. We need you to fix it. We need you to help us solve it. And I think that was a real myth buster, because when I came in, that was not at all the expectation that I thought that people were thinking. So, old approach, how we've done this before. Does everybody get the reference of a whack-a-mole game? Just making sure. We viewed this as predominantly a problem that was going to be solved by money and technology. And you could go and try to get more bandwidth. How many of you in this room have had to talk to a country director and get them to spend an extra $2,000 a month to double bandwidth in a location? And what happened when they said okay?
Didn't count.
Sorry?
Didn't count.
Latency is still the same.
Yeah, within a week, that bandwidth got used up because it wasn't managed. So then we started to throw technology at it, and that makes a big difference. But we weren't really looking at the stakeholders right and engaging with them and looking at the whole solution for how we wanted to solve this. So about this time, NetHope launched the Center for the Digital Nonprofit. And I don't know how many of you know about it, but it's very much focused on the concept of transformation and approach to having successful big change that involves people, process, and technology all together. And I was really intrigued by it. And also, when you think about it and everybody talks about it, it's really big things. It's like, we're going to buy drones so we can deliver pizzas to our users, or we're going to put in a huge ERP system or something big. But it kind of occurred to me that these same principles could be used in a very small way to solve this problem. And so that was really the approach we used the whole time that we were doing this. So we started by flipping the script. So if you look at kind of the old message, it was, it's okay to buy as much bandwidth as you can afford, even if it's not enough to do your job or meet your mission. And because of that, we did things like select technologies because they could handle low bandwidth environments. They had offline modes, or they had nearline or occasionally connected modes. And that market is almost gone now. I mean, if 99% of your customers have good bandwidth, you're going to invest your R&D dollars into features and functions and making your product look better, and you are not going to be concerned with that 1% that needs it to work well in a low bandwidth environment. So if you want to have good technology, you've got to fix the problem, not look for solutions that work around the problem. And so we set that message that connectivity was critical to fulfilling our mission. And that was the message that we just repeated over and over and over until it started to sink into people. So when we went to take our approach, we really started with people. That really began with, who are our stakeholders? So we looked at the groups of people within our organization. We started with local IT, regional IT, people in programs that wanted to be able to interact with the technologies they needed to fulfill their mission, heads of departments that needed to roll out, like our HR, head of HR, rolling out a global HR system, needed to make sure that we could deliver that to the customers. The executives were very interested in removing barriers to success. So everybody had a stake in solving this problem. And once we had that list of stakeholders, we broke down what their motivations were, what was important to them, and how could we use them to help solve this, or partner with them to help solve this, I will say. We broadcasted out on a lot of different channels. I would say we said what we were going to do, and we really kind of stuck our necks out. And we talked about it on our Facebook workplace channels. We talked about it in team meetings. We talked about it in intranet posts. And we even did things like a podcast on our in-house Mercy Corps radio to talk about this and how important it was and socialize it and get it to the point that everybody was aware of it and thinking about it and it became part of the global conversation. We also looked at the actual approach to how we were engaging with people. So we didn't just want to set a standard and say, here's the standard, you're not meeting it, you need to spend money to meet this standard. It was really not about the policy, it was about how can we partner so we can all solve this problem. And that made a big difference because we were bringing something to the table and also expecting something. It wasn't a one-way street. So getting into the actual process and the approach we took, we really based it on how our programs worked, which was really familiar to people. So, we used concepts like theory of change and how we set indicators and targets. We did all the things that a program would do to a donor, and we reported in largely the same ways. And that made it really easy for people to understand and engage because it was the way they were working every day. We went about baselining and setting standards, but those standards were very, very user-focused standards. Once we had a baseline, we published it all over the place, and we kept that publishing going on throughout the course of the project, so that we could track what we were doing and also just keep it on people's radar. We got a baseline to show where we were, and then in order to actually take that baseline and turn it into change, we adopted kind of a worst first policy. So we'd broken things down like into red, yellow, green sites, ultimately. And our goal was to get the reds to yellow first. We weren't going to worry about getting the yellows to green. So we wanted to get everybody up to a standard first that they could all engage with the technologies we had. Even if it wasn't perfect, at least they had a fighting chance. And then from there, we started to focus on getting from okay to good, or we're about to. We're not quite there yet. So any of the sites that were in that kind of red zone after the baseline got put into a special bucket, and we did deep dives on all of them. So we went in and investigated with the local IT people to understand what were all the things impacting bandwidth problems or connectivity problems, because there's a lot of them. It's not just you're not buying enough, is it good bandwidth? Do you have power? Is the ISP delivering what they're actually what you're paying for? Do you have infected computers in your network that are blowing through your traffic? There's a whole bunch of things that can happen that can take two sites with the same bandwidth and make them function very, very differently. So we used those deep dives and learned from them, and then we developed mitigation strategies, and we went to the country leadership with those reports and a strategy for how to fix it. And in a lot of cases, it didn't really require money to fix, surprisingly, much less than I thought it would. So we've been doing that for a year now, and we've made some really good success, which we'll show you shortly. But the next step after that, eventually we're going to hit a level where we've fixed everything we can fix, and we've gone to the country directors and gotten them to put the money in to fix anything else. And there's going to be that final pool of sites that nobody can fix without getting money from headquarters and getting support from headquarters. So we take that much smaller problem and go to our executive team who know this is going on and have been on board with it from day one. And we are going to get them to help us solve that final bit of the problem. And the way we're trying to look at this is basically saying to them, give us a relatively small pool of funds that we can use to subsidize bandwidth in the absolute worst places we have. I think you were just talking about that, actually.
Insane.
Yeah. And then taking that pool of funds and going back into the countries and getting them to match the funds that we're willing to give them. Because did anybody read Freakonomics? That book? What was the thing they said over and over? Incentives work. So if we can go to the countries and say, we're going to put in $1,000 a month so that we can get these 3 sites fixed, you need to put in 1,000 as well. I'm very, very confident that they will do that. And we've seen that work in other places very, very effectively. Lastly, we're close to the point now where we're going to take this from a really intense project that we've been working on for a year, and then we're going to just operationalize it. So we're going to turn it into an ongoing business activity where we don't have to put in this intense effort forever to keep it going. We want to just build it into our normal course of business and make it a fairly easy process to just keep going so that the standard stays where it is. Probably the hardest thing we did through this was trying to come up with a good system of scoring the health of sites and developing that methodology and how we were going to gather the data. Connectivity is super complicated. Many, many different factors can impact it, and it's hard to just say, here's the standard, it's 100 megabits per second per user, blah, 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 because it's not really going to mean anything if one of those is a VSAT, and one of those is a cable connection, and one of those is WiMAX, and there's a bunch of other factors imposing on that site. So we developed a system that took all those factors in play. And we started with that baseline of how many kilobits per second per user we had in a site, set that as a base, assigned that a score on a 0 to 100 score, and then we took all the other factors and we adjusted the score up and down based on those. So say you got a 60 beginning score because of the bandwidth you had, but you put a Meraki in. Now you've got the ability to manage your bandwidth, plus 10. But you're on a C-band VSAT, so you've got high latency, minus 10. And we just went up and down. If your contention ratio is bad, if you had a consumer grade link versus a business class link, if you didn't have a system to cache Windows updates, things like that. We went through it. We took that process. Once we'd done it, we got feedback from all the different stakeholder groups, and then we decided we needed to calibrate. So what one organization needs, just a quick check. Am I still talking loud enough? Okay, thank you. What one organization needs may not be the same for everybody. It's hard to say that globally we could all come up with the same standard. So what we did was, we took sites that we knew were yellow or had okay bandwidth, or we knew had really poor bandwidth, based on the user experience and our own experience, and we ran those through the scoring to see if they actually matched what our score thought they would have. And then we started adjusting until we reached that calibration that we felt good. We took about a month to do this, beginning to end. And at some point you just have to say that's good enough to do. So we got our process, and then we started gathering data and establishing a baseline. So just to give you an idea, when I say we looked for a user-focused description of how we would rank a site into that red, yellow, green, this is kind of what I mean. So here's the point range that we would have, and then for each of those good, acceptable, and unacceptable, it was a very user-centric, like this is what a user can expect to do in that site. Like I can, if I'm in a yellow site, I might be able to do a video conference, but for sure I should be able to do a good audio conference. But it's possible that a single user might be able to saturate the whole link. Those types of things. I'm not going to go into this in detail. We'd be happy to talk about it later, and we are going to share this, but we could go for hours. trying to go through. I think I'm going to skip. So the data gathering itself. So we had 145 field sites we had to get through, and we wanted to do it in 1 month. So we crowdsourced it. We made a list of all the local IT people, all the points of contact in places where we didn't have local IT people. We made a massive Google spreadsheet, which turned out to be really unwieldy, by the way. And we had people fill in that data, and then our regional team worked with the local IT teams to make sure that everybody kind of agreed on it. We put that into a dashboard that we spent a lot of time on, and we also started publishing those baseline reports. So in order to, so once we had the initial data, we actually did the scoring ourselves. So there was a small set of people that did the scoring. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to make sure that if we were introducing bias into how we were scoring, at least it was consistent bias. And we did take those scores and then one-on-one meet with the local IT people and make sure that they agreed with it. So there was a little bit of a negotiation going on. And nobody's goal was to win. You know, it was to really get accurate data so we knew where we stood. And we were really clear. We had to overcome that a lot, I would say, with some local IT because they wanted to be able to say, oh, I'm all green. But you know, sometimes if you fudge the results to make your site look green, you're not going to get the help you need to fix the problem. So we made sure it was really clear with people. So just this, we'll go into this in a little bit, but this is what our dashboard looked like. So we have our offices by their health range and also our people. So we wanted to see the number of people in the offices and what percentage of our team were in that red, yellow, green zone. And then each of the sites you could click on and get detailed information. This was published to the whole organization, and it's been used in some really interesting ways. So for instance, as they've done the global HR rollout, the teams that are going to train in the field look this up beforehand before they go on a site to see what they're going to be facing when they get there. And if it's a red site, they'll come to us and talk to us about like what can we do. And sometimes we've been able to help that out in advance. And then we also made sure in the reports and things, we tried to use some pretty, well, I'm not a designer obviously, but we tried to use really nice, simple graphics that were engaging to people. Because a lot of the people, this was a super dry thing. You know, a country director does not want to read about kilobits per second, blah, blah, blah. They want to just know where they're red, yellow, green. And we wanted to make sure this was something they wanted to read. And the feedback from this was really good. I mean, the CFO wrote us and said, thank you for doing this. This is really helpful. And that was the kind of feedback that we wanted to keep seeing so that people were part of it and felt like they were engaged. I'm going to pause here for questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to Zerom to talk about what our mitigation strategies look like and what we were able to do. So does anybody have questions? Yes.
Yeah, so what, like, I mean, user need, and you say it's based on the business needs that they have, but how did you gauge, like, the application? Like, I work for Doctors Without Borders, so in our sites, there's a huge spectrum of the application bandwidth, resource consumption. I'm just wondering, like, how that factored into,
So,
or maybe it's standard across your offices, I don't know, but in our case, it's really different from site to site.
I would say that we were mostly concerned with business applications that people were using. There is a limited set of those. So we do have we have programs that may use ComCare and others that use a different system for case management. So there is a lot of that, but we didn't really focus so much on individual applications. We didn't try to measure like how many seconds a page would load, things like that. We didn't get very precise. We tried to make it really be a lot more qualitative from the user standpoint, and we only focused on the very simplest ones. Our feeling was if we went down that path, we would end up having to measure so much stuff that it just didn't. We felt it was more important to have a simple thing that we could engage people with than try to get really, really precise. And also just because of the number of factors involved, it's hard. I mean, when you've got 100 different things to worry about, you're never going to know which one of those things is causing an issue, right?
Yeah, got it. I have a follow-up. What was the role of like the infrastructure innovation? So in our case, like signal aggregation, how network infrastructure is more mobile for emergency responses. That's a key part of the connectivity strategy. Was that? I'm sorry, I came in late, so I didn't hear what that part was there. But what part was the actual like hardware outside of buying the bandwidth? What role did like innovation on the hardware side
So,
come into?
I mean, probably the biggest thing is we were rolling out Meraki from a hodgepodge of different systems that were independently selected.
A single
Yeah,
technology.
so going from consumer grade to enterprise grade equipment, that we had something to do. That was probably the biggest thing. Now, as we got into mitigating the red sites, we often did find opportunities to change out ISPs and look for different connection options. And Zerom will talk about that more, but it was surprising how often we went into a field site that was in the red and just took a fresh look at what was available locally and found out that
You had another
there were
service
better
provider.
options,
Yeah.
and just nobody had looked for a long time, and
Okay.
they just made a decision and assumed that was fine. And I would say in a lot of times we were able to get more bandwidth for less money and actually save them money at the same time we were increasing their performance. So I'm going to take you first, and then you, sir.
So is the plan to just do this measurement once, or will there be follow-up measurements going forward?
It's meant to be in perpetuity. So what we will do is every year we're going to change the standard. We're going to review the standard and see if we want to up it. You know, like basically if we think we need more bandwidth based on new technologies we're putting in, then we'll up that. We'll revise the standard. So sites that were yellow or green may drop a level because of that. But yeah, that's what I mean by when we're going to operationalize it, we're just going to make it part of how we do business. Yes.
Can you elaborate a bit on the zero cost options that you use to improve connectivity?
I'm going to park that
Okay.
and wait for Zerom
Okay.
to cover that one. Anything before I move on? How are we? Okay, we're good on time. All right, thank you. Sorry, is there one
Oh,
quick?
it was me, yeah. Hi, Sergio Murillo, Red 52. From what I'm hearing, you have a lot of different technologies for connectivity. Maybe DSL, maybe cable modems, some satellite. Have you thought about standardizing and maybe going all satellite globally? And
Well, I'd love to go no satellite. Right now, the way our business model is and the way our funding model is, I don't have any any infrastructure budget to pay for bandwidth within IT. So I would have to go and really change the business model to get that to become possible. And it could happen, but it's not. We've got a lot we can do before that right now.
did you find that maybe a DSL modem in one country might be advertised at 1 meg or 10 megs, or put a number on it, doesn't matter, and that same advertised bandwidth in another country might be different?
Yeah, I mean, what people advertise and what they deliver is, there's very little correlation, what I find, in a lot of cases.
Imagine that.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna park that question. I'm gonna switch on to Zerom so we make sure we get through this, and then we'll have another section for questions at the end. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll take you through the initial baseline results we had in August 2018. That was our fiscal year Q1. And our total population, user population, were 5,185. And out of 144 sites, we had 45 sites were categorized under unacceptable. That means 45 of our sites were working on a red environment. So, and this means 17% of our user population were working under unacceptable or under red environment. And we had also identified the per megabyte cost difference between the cheapest and most expensive locations. For example, the bandwidth cost in London for £1 would be 18 pounds in Boer, Central Africa Republic. So we could see a big difference on the cost between the red and green sites. So as Michael said, once we identified the sites, actually we categorized them into three, where green, yellow, and red. And what we did is we went through the deep dive process, or thorough deep dive process. And during our deep dive process, we developed a deep dive questionnaire which has got 7 pages and detail of questions that we worked with the local IT or with the person who is in charge on those specific offices. Then we developed a deep dive report analysis and worked with the country directors on the findings. So as Michael said, the participation from the senior management team, the country director and regional director were very good because it was transparent and participatory. Most of the country directors were very happy to assist us to get the support we needed to move the site from red to yellow. So these are actually the 2 documents that we used during the deep dive process. And the first one is, it's a 7-page process, 7-page document, and it has covered the wide area network, local area network, whether we have endpoints, whether we have a proper firewall system for utilization and optimization of usage, and so on and so on. So once we worked with our local IT guys, then we presented this report to the senior management team, the country director, or people who make decisions. So basically what this report shows is what our findings were and what we were missing and what are the gaps, so that the site to move from red to yellow. And eventually we explained to them how much money or the price implication for that site to move from red to yellow. We are going to give these documents later. Michael is going to upload it. So finally, we came up with a mitigation toolkit because most of the issues that we identified in our red sites were actually cross-cutting issues, and basically they fall under these 4. And the first one is utilization, traffic shaping related issues. So what we did is we roll out Cisco Meraki in most of our field offices. So far we covered around 90 field offices, and we also did the ISP intervention. We have identified a lot of issues with our ISP, so we had to intervene with the ISP and then get specific. Infrastructure improvement. This one is something that Network was discussing yesterday. It's part of like power issue is one of the issues that we have in most of our field sites. So we have to work with the country directors to make sure we have a backup power system. For example, we introduced a solar power system in Uganda, in Nigeria, and Middle East, Asia. So we are working on the infrastructure improvement. And finally, it was upgrading bandwidth. If that specific office needs bandwidth upgrade, we do bandwidth upgrade. If we are to add on a second ISP or a third ISP, we just put it for the purpose of load balancing or failover. And then if we have to replace that ISP, then we have to replace it. So these are our mitigation toolkits to make sure that specific office moves from red to yellow and from yellow to green. So how did we do? Actually, Michael talked about the dashboard, and I wanted to take you through the dashboard later, but I want to go back to the baseline assessment and then compare our results. So our initial basement assessment, we're showing 31% of our sites were under unacceptable, and 17% of the total user population were working in an acceptable environment. And right now, we reduced the 31% of our sites to 10%, and the 17% of user population reduced it to 6% after we do all this deep dive and improvement projects. So that is an excellent progress for us.
Just if I could intervene, so we had set a target of improving it by 40% in a year, and to go from 31 down to 10 was way more than we thought we would be able to accomplish. So we've been thrilled with the results of this.
So this is our dashboard. So you can see from the left here the fiscal year Q1, 19 Q1 we had 31%, and can you see that?
It's still in PowerPoint.
No. Okay.
But you're not in the live dashboard. Oh, you know what? I think it's because of the way the monitor's set up.
Okay. So you can clearly see where we started and where we are now. And then here per user where we started it was 17 and now we are in the 6%. And you can also see the green. It's really increasing from like first day up to now. Here are the sites, and there is a visibility. Mostly when the country directors open this site, they will tell you like why my site is red. That's a very important thing. So we explain to them, take them through the process, and eventually people are in competition mode. I mean, they don't want to see their site is under red. They want to be like part of the other group. So if you go and see how, let me hover around. This one is our revenue office. So normally when you click here, it will show you the amount of bandwidth per person in kilobits per second, and it will also show you the number of staff in that specific office. I don't know, it's not showing it here, but normally when you click here, it will show you the details. You can also go to table format here, and then you can do all types of stuff.
So you're looking at the dashboard, but that's still the screenshot of the dashboard. I don't think you're going to, because of the mode you're in, you're not going to be able to switch it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so when you click to the table mode, you will see all the information and you can search whatever you want. If you want to focus on a specific site, you can search that specific site and find out what are the issues in that specific site. And if you want to see the data source, where we are using Google Drive and Google Sheet, you can click here and it will show you the whole database we have for the past 5 quarters. So I'll give to Michael, so that he's going to talk on what is next, and then we are going to open for a question and answer.
Michael, is that in Power BI or Tableau or something that you built?
This is our studio.
It's done in our studio.
Studio.
This is a totally cobbled together, to us this is a prototype, and this leads to the question, which is what next? So the next thing we want to go to, now that we're very close to having the sites we need done, and we've got roughly 13 field sites that are still in the red. They're in 2 countries out of almost 40 that we're in. Anybody want to guess?
Both in Africa.
DRC is all green. Nope. I'll tell you.
Mali.
Afghanistan. So South Sudan and Afghanistan are the 2. And they're also the 2 that don't, in most of the field areas, have anything but VSEN. And that's where your real cost is. As soon as you can get a terrestrial link, you're good. So we want to go to the executive leadership now and get them to help us get over this. And we're pretty confident that we've shrunk the problem down to such a small level now that it's easy for them to solve. And I think that they're going to realize that their role is important in making it happen. Part of operationalizing this process is replacing that dashboard with something that's driven by a database, not a spreadsheet, and using, I'm not sure if we're looking at Power BI, Tableau, we're looking at a number of different solutions to do it. Be awesome if we could get one of our sponsors to like build it out in a way that we could all use it, I think, would be very cool. We also want to expand it, so we want to add layers. It's not just going to be about connectivity. We're going to look at all the other things that create success in IT in the field. So we create layers for support, training, infrastructure, security, business continuity, all those other areas where we don't have a lot of visibility now, and we know that we've got substandard service in the field that we need to bring up. So we want to be able to create layers that we can cut across a lot of these areas. And lastly, why we're here, we want to spread the knowledge. So I wanted to actually call out, we're going to give you all of the artifacts of what we have. We are very, very happy to meet with you one-on-one if you're interested in trying to launch something like this yourselves. And Anders from DRC has actually started down this process. So he engaged with us a couple of months ago. Do you want to just talk about what you guys are doing?
I didn't really want to, but I had to. I'm working in the Danish Refugee Council. We are like 8,000 people globally in 40 countries. And we came from the exact same situation as you. The countries were, down to the local offices, were fending for themselves, very successful, going really well. And then we decided to go with Microsoft Dynamics. It's the first global system that we've kind of ever done. And we went live 1st of January this year in a big bang for 8,000 employees. And I don't think you can do anything more complex than an ERP system. And doing it in an NGO is even worse. So right now the organization is in a state of shock. But that's not how it goes. But when it comes to connectivity, we have some major problems as well. When Microsoft sold the idea to us, like I wasn't there at the time, but they said that everywhere you can send an email, you can work with Dynamics. And the business said, great, then we'll have no problems because we have connectivity globally. And it's very hard to come up with a requirement specification. Microsoft says you need at least 50 kilobits, but we recommend more. And by the way, you cannot calculate it by multiplying the number of users with 50 kilobits. So basically they're saying nothing. But they say maximum 300 milliseconds latency. Okay, then VSATs are out. Then the VSATs are out of scope. But we had no way of actually measuring this. So I got this framework from you. Microsoft directed me to you because they don't want to come up with a requirement specification, and I can understand it because it's very dangerous. So I got the data from 217 locations globally, ran the same framework on it, and we can see now that approximately 25% of our offices and employees will have a really hard time working in Dynamics. And it's better late than never, but we should have probably done it like 3 years ago. But right now it's still it's a little bit toxic now. I have not been allowed to reveal the report yet because we are very few people. I'm actually the only one working on this, and I'm not a technical guy at all. I'm a project manager. We have no resources for it, and the people that are managing the Dynamics are 100% trying to get that to work, so they simply do not have time for this. But I shared it anyway with some of the regional IT managers, and based on this we had the feedback from Sudan. They were working in Khartoum. They had a decent wireless connection, but then there was half a megabyte VSAT shared with 4 other companies, and trying to work with Dynamics, that's not going to fly. So they did a survey based on this result, and they came back with where we can actually upgrade it to WiMAX, 6 megabit WiMAX from the VSATs. So maybe we can even get better connections at lower cost. In car it actually works, but they are on VSATs, expensive VSATs. They have 2.8% of our employees and are spending 18.6% of the total internet budget, $268,000 a year. So another question is, do we need connectivity at any cost, or does it make more sense to put the data into an Excel spreadsheet, send it via good old email, and have someone enter it in a site that has connection? I cannot say yes or no, but I can say that we need to think about that. And I've spoken with a number of NGOs here, and also last year, and today I'll send an email out to some people from SOS Children's Villages, NRC, Plan International, MEDA, Rescue.org, Save the Children, Oxfam. I'll keep you in the loop, because there are many NGOs are close to launching a big, very vital application like an ERP system. And then connectivity goes from something important, but we have WhatsApp for VoIP anyway if it doesn't work, and we can browse the internet when we get home and stuff like that. But it goes from important to 100% business critical. We have a Dynamics cloud only. There's no alternative. We went live and management had the tagline, there's no plan B. So there is no plan B. So, and I've been saying for ages, we need to be able to work in an offline with an online system, but they've simply been so busy, so they're trying to complete stuff. And thanks to this framework, we now have an overview. And some places where it's red it works, and some places where it's green it doesn't, but it's the best we've ever had. And we need to, of course, to modify it to our needs. And I'll be trying, with the help of NetHope, maybe to come up with a framework, because if it doesn't work in a location, what are we going to recommend them? What are the actual requirement specifications that we need to come up with? As much as possible, yeah, but what is the right amount? And that's still a challenge, but we're very grateful for the framework, and a lot of people are very interested in it.
So I want to be respectful of people's time. We just hit past our time. We're happy to answer questions, but feel free if you need to leave, and I think we probably need to be out of the room in about 2-3 minutes. But yes.
Hi, Janet from Humberstone Gold. We have just done a similar rollout in terms of Meraki, and as you say, it's made a massive impact. Just want to understand, did you use centralized rules-based approach in terms of the Meraki, or did you let the country offices do their own rules?
We're getting there. So we started with a set of rules. We did give administrative access to the field people, and they've riffed on what we tried to set up, but I think we're definitely heading towards trying to be as close to the same as possible. And I'm happy to talk to anybody you want in your team about that, because I've done 3 Meraki rollout agencies now, and I've got a really strong set of opinions about how you do traffic shaping. So, okay, last question, and then we'll let you guys go.
User. Do you take user survey after you roll out your...
Yeah, actually, so we also did a qualitative before and after survey. I forgot to say, so our T4D team and Errol put together something, and it was, we actually saw really good qualitative before and after results in the places we did this.
Right, because IT people think differently than you.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where, and frankly, we'd love to have this dashboard have like a user star rating on each site. I think that'd be awesome. Thank you, everybody. We're around all week.